countries that the United States is labeling as state sponsors of terrorism are actually just countries that have risen up and fought against imperialism. And not only that, but people within the U.S. who rise up and fight against imperialism, against racist police repression, are also persecuted by the U.S. government. We saw that with the detainments of brigadistas coming back from May Day. We saw that with Bob Menendez arresting us a couple days ago. And so next, I want to invite up Comrade Yejide from the African People's Socialist Party to talk about their struggle against the persecution they're facing from the imperialist U.S. government.
Uhuru! Uhuru is a Kiswahili word that means freedom. I want to thank my comrades. Greetings from the African People's Socialist Party and the Hands Off Uhuru and Hands Off Africa campaign. We join you in demanding the U.S. government remove Cuba from the state sponsors of terrorism list because Cuba has always stood in solidarity with African people, both inside of its borders and outside of its borders. Cuba, this small island in the Caribbean, has done more to promote freedom and goodwill in the 63 years since the Cuban Revolution than the U.S. has done in the hundreds of years of its existence. U.S. says Cuba is a terrorist state when the U.S. was created and maintains its hegemony in the world through terror. It's not a secret. America was formed through violence. This land we are standing on is not America. It is indigenous land, violently taken away. It is a settler colony, and African people are domestically colonized here. Instead of making peace to rectify the wrongs of the past, the U.S. stays true to its violent and oppressive nature, making war against people around the world by creating chaos and eliminating anything that smells like self-determination. For Africa and African people still struggling to recapture our homeland and use all that it has to offer to improve the conditions of our people, Cuba is a light. Because despite all of the efforts of imperialism to destroy the will of the people, Cuba survives. But the arrogance of the U.S. settler colonial government to call Cuba terror. The list it creates serves only to deepen the grip of terror inside its borders and in the world. This can only be done through a colonial assault without which capitalism and imperialism could not exist. As oppressed people and those in solidarity with us, our continued resistance is paramount in the fight for self-determination. We recognize that colonialism is the culprit. To stand against U.S. imperialism means we must also stand against a domestic colony created on the backs of so many of us. The reign of terror that the U.S. carries throughout the world is launched from the home bases throughout this colony. It starts by attempting to weaken resistance groups who make it our mission to expose the ongoing war the U.S. colony inflicts on us. That's what's happened when the FBI raided the Uhuru Movement's facilities on July 29, 2022, and the U.S. State Department indicted leaders of our movement who for over 40 plus years has defined parasitic capitalism and organized people to unite with the struggle for African self-determination and freedom. When the U.S. government came for the Uhuru movement, we hit back at every step, organizing our own forces and building coalitions with freedom-loving people all over the world. We are confident in our capacity to win because the freedom struggle is still happening, because all of us are in the streets right now, having meetings right now, demanding Cuba off the list. Down with AFRICOM, free Palestine, and many other demands for justice and liberation. Yes, for us, colonialism is the culprit, and we won't rest until we put it to rest. We won't rest until Cuba is free from the U.S. colonial restrictions and is able to provide for itself because it is free to do so. We can't wait and must organize for the free world where a free Cuba and a free Africa can exist in all of its potential. Stand against U.S. world hard hegemony. Stand against U.S. imperialism. Colonized people must be free. Get Cuba off the list and put the real terrorists on trial. Hands off the Uhuru 3.
Thank you. Kurasi?
Hell no!
Kurasi?
Hell no!
Kurasi?
Hell no!
All right, y'all. I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker. This weekend has been amazing for so many reasons, but especially because U.S. workers and U.S. labor unions are showing up to show their solidarity with Cuba. As many of y'all know, NNOC and our partner orgs have been passing resolutions around the country telling Biden to take Cuba off the state sponsors of terrorism list, to lift the blockade. 93 of these resolutions have been passed in the past couple years, representing well over 50 million people. Most recently the DC and New York City councils, but also dozens of labor unions who are standing in solidarity with the Cuban people. So now I'm going to invite up Chris Smalls and the Amazon Labor Union, who just got back from Cuba, because y'all, U.S. workers are not free while our government is still oppressing Cuban people and all people in countries that are victims of U.S. imperialism around the world. So it's really important that we are standing in solidarity and that workers of the world unite.
Cuba sí? Cuba sí? Cuba sí? Cuba sí? Well, this is funny, because I'm supposed to be on the other side of the wall. I was invited there last year, so let me tell y'all a little bit about that visit last year with Joe Biden. I don't remember the conversation. It's not a good thing. When you find out who's really running the country, it's actually a scary thing. And when I walked into the White House last year, I said, this is not that impressive. This is not what I thought it would be. And to know that these people are running the country and to have a conversation that I can't even remember right now, that is a scary thing. And let me tell y'all, I mentioned this yesterday, I was invited to the White House this past Tuesday for Juneteenth. I was supposed to be right here on the other side of the wall celebrating the ending of slavery, but I declined that. Matter of fact, I'm here today to let them know, because they do have their, their microphones and their cameras and their snipers on the roof. They're listening, they're watching, they're paying attention. I want them to hear me loud and clear. Do not invite me to the White House anymore until you end the blockade. Bottom line. Also, Bob Menendez is from New Jersey, my home state. Oh, this gets worse, because I just found this out as well. Not only do he represent a town that I grew up 10 minutes away from, this dude had the audacity to use my hashtag Hot Labor Summer on Twitter. Oh yeah, I caught him a few weeks ago, Bob Menendez. You got the audacity to use my hashtag Hot Labor Summer. You don't know shit about labor. I know it's hot because we hot outside right now. It is a hot labor summer, but you, sir, you, of all people, cannot use that hashtag until you end the blockade. As a matter of fact, that goes for every politician. I don't even want to see y'all tweeting about hot labor summer. Because, as y'all mentioned, we one of the very few labor unions to show up. It's one thing to write a resolution. 93 of them, it could be 103 of them. It could be 1,000 of them. That's words on paper. But to actually show up, it's a different type of fight. It's a different type of stance. And let me shed light on this. We're a small independent union. Yes, the Amazon Labor Union, we made history last year, one of the historical victories of voting for the first time in American history, the Union for Amazon Workers. But understand this, we're independent. We're not tied to the Democratic Party. We're not tied to the establishment. We move how we want to move we take stances that we see fit. And to stand with the Cuban people is what we see fit. But we shouldn't be the only ones. Right across the street, the AFL-CIO is right there. That's the headquarters. They have 69 of the biggest unions in the country. Where are they? So when y'all talk about the Amazon labor union, what are we doing? Tell them we making moves, we taking stances, we standing with the people. What are the other unions doing? What are the other union presidents doing? I shouldn't be the only one. As a union president, let's think about the risk that I'm taking. So it's not only that we hold politicians accountable, the president accountable, we got to hold unions accountable. We got to hold labor accountable. The AFL-CIO was right there on Black Lives Matter Plaza. They so close to the White House that they had to contact them to even come out on their balcony. So if they can hear us, we need to let them know that more union presidents should be standing with the people of Cuba. And let's tie this struggle together before I close out. Can y'all do me a favor? Can y'all just send a message to Jeff Bezos for me? Y'all don't mind doing that for me? Fuck Jeff Bezos! 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 Billionaires, they gotta go! Billionaires, they gotta go! Billionaires, they gotta go! Billionaires, they gotta go! Fuck Jeff Bezos! 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 Cuba C! Cuba C! Cuba C! Cuba C! If we don't get it, 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 shut it down. One more time, we don't get it. Shut it down. No amount of money in the world can amount to the power of people when we come together. Love and solidarity is free, and showing up is free. Joe Biden, do not send me no more emails. I'm not coming. In the blockade. Viva Cuba. Power to the people, y'all.
Woo! All right, we got a few more speakers, and I would like to call up Lillian House from Answer Coalition. All right, what's up, y'all? My name is Lillian House. I'm an organizer with the Answer Coalition. That's Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. I really want to shout out everyone who's here today. In the heat, our people on the banners holding it down. The discomfort that we're feeling in the sun is nothing compared to the steady discomfort that the people of Cuba experience every day in so many ways that is unnecessary and that is due to the cruelty of our government. I want to give a special shout out to Bob Hilliard, who's here today. He's 98 today. He's been a lifelong friend of the Cuban people, a fighter for peace and against fascism, against racism, and he chose to spend his 98th birthday here with us in the sun. Thank you. So why are we here today? We're here because there's a war right now being waged by our government against the Cuban people. It's a war that none of us consented to, that none of us voted for, and yet has nonetheless been going on for 63 years against the Cuban people. And it is a war using the most cruel and inhumane methods against the people of Cuba, depriving them of the necessities of life to force them to submit to what our government says they should do. Do we support that? No! Do we support that? No! This war is at a pitch that has never been seen before for Cuba. because the Trump and the Biden administrations have turned up the heat on Cuba to a point that has never been seen by a country in history. The Trump administration introduced 243 additional measures to the blockade during the COVID health crisis, when Cuba was fighting for the survival of its people without access to medical supplies that everyone else in the world can purchase, can trade. That was when Trump put Cuba on the state sponsors of terror list, knowing that's a lie. And has Biden turned it back? No. Biden, the great enemy of the Republicans? No. Biden, the great alternative to Trump, has he done anything different? No. Has he even returned it to the Obama-era policy? No. No, and you know why? Because they think that finally, with the fuel crisis, with the COVID crisis, with the suffering of the Cuban people, that they finally may be able to push Cuba so far into a corner that they fold, that they give up everything that they have fought for and struggled for 63 years. That is what Biden thinks he's going to achieve. Will he achieve that? No! And why is it? Why is it that Cuba is the big enemy of the United States? It's because Cuba dares to say that they are a sovereign people. It is because Cuba dared to kick out the U.S. corporations. It is because Cuba said that our land and our resources and our labor are for us, not for you. Not for U.S. corporations, not for any foreign corporations. It's for the people. And a lot of us have been to Cuba, and we've seen firsthand a society that takes whatever they have, no matter how small, no matter how limited. It takes everything that it has and puts it towards the needs of the people. And that is what makes it a beacon to the 600 million people of Latin America who are still fighting to overthrow the reign of impoverishment, of illiteracy, of hunger, of disease. They see that Cuba, even with so little, does so much for its people. And this is why it's the enemy of the United States. It is not because Cuba is a terrorist. It's not because it's a sponsor of terror. It is because Cuba strikes terror in the hearts of the imperialists. It strikes terror in their hearts for the fear that the oppressed and the exploited of the world will see Cuba's example, and they too will stand up, and they will say, we too refuse to be subjugated. That is why the Cuban people suffer, and yet they refuse to give in. They refuse to give up their morals. They refuse to give up their principles. They refuse even under everything that the United States has. And they will not fall. They will not give in. But that doesn't mean for a minute that we can rest, because it is the government that speaks in our name, that depends on our silence, that is inflicting this cruelty on the Cuban people. And so it must be our task every single day to fight to bring down the blockade, to fight to expose the lies, because we know, we are completely confident that if the people of the United States understood the reality of what Cuba is striving for, the reality of the criminality of our government, that they would understand who are the true terrorists, and the blockade will fall. So that is our task. That is the task of every single one of us. Cuba sí! No! 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 Thank you. Venceremos, 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 venceremos. We will win, yeah!
solidarizarnos con el pueblo de Cuba. Nosotros somos la víctima reciente de este sistema.
We want to have solidarity with the Cuban people. We are the recently at the end of the stick here from the U.S. empire.
Nosotros aquí venimos a denunciar que nuestro pueblo peruano se ha ejercido un golpe de Estado a nuestro país, hecho y dirigido, sabemos que es por nuestros recursos naturales.
We have recently gone through a coup, and it is because they have tried and are trying to get our natural resources.
Queremos decirle a todos que la lucha de los pueblos oprimidos no tiene frontera.
We want to say that the people's struggle has no borders.
Y queremos decirle que nosotros pedimos nuestra soberanía, igual como todos los países de Sudamérica.
We are asking for our sovereignty just like every other country in South America.
Queremos decirle que el pueblo eligió a Pedro Castillo, el pueblo eligió a nuestro presidente y vamos a luchar hasta que él sea restituido.
The people chose Pedro Castillo and we will fight until he is back in power.
El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. United will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. United will never be defeated. Queremos darle las gracias y también decirles a todos que en Perú es ilegal protestar y eso es lo que queremos denunciar. El 19 hay una gran movilización para sacar a este gobierno de facto y quiero decirles a todos que por favor nos apoyen para que estén atentos a todo lo que pase. Este 19 de julio hay una movilización nacional e internacional en el pueblo de Perú.
July 19th, there are national protests around Peru, and we just want to help talking about it and just telling people what's going on in South America, especially in Peru, especially with the U.S. Powers and the military in the country right now.
Así es, y también denunciar que en Perú, Estados Unidos está enviando 1,000 soldados para ayudar a reprimir a las protestas. Esto es algo que nos concierne a todos los peruanos porque realmente esto es injerencia directa.
We are also trying to highlight that the U.S. has sent 1,000 troops into our country, and it's also a similar fight, a similar struggle with the other South American countries here.
Muchas gracias y decirles a todos que nosotros venceremos en esta lucha por, restituir a nuestros presidentes y luchar por nuestra soberanía. Muchas gracias.
We will fight for sovereignty and we will fight for the restitution of the president, and we will all win. Thank you.
Yeah! Now I'd like to welcome up Cameron Hart from IPA.
Who's got the power? What kind of power? Who's got the power? What kind of power? What kind of power? What kind of power? That's right, folks. When I look around this crowd, I see people's power in its truest form. I see people's power because that's what it's going to take to defeat this blockade, to defeat the sanctions on all countries. We mean against Cuba. We mean against the people of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We mean against the people of Iran, the people of Venezuela, Syria, and any people who face this empire we must stand in solidarity with. That organized struggle is going to be what defeats the blockade, and my name is Cameron. I'm representing the International People's Assembly. The International People's Assembly touches every continent because what we need is a global struggle. We have global issues. We have global problems. They manifest different in different places, but we have to be unified. Is that right?
We can't be free until the people of Africa are free, is that right? We can't be free until the people of Latin America are free, is that right? The people of Asia must be free, is that right? Even the people of Europe, we all must stand in solidarity and defeat these imperialists. The International People's Assembly stood alongside our comrades in the NNOC. We went to Cuba for May Day, May 1st, International Workers' Day. International Workers' Day is so significant for the world, and we are fighting to make it more and more popular here in the U.S. Is that right? So we went there, and what did we see? We saw none of the lies that these imperialists tell about Cuba. We saw a loving society. We saw a peaceful society. And above all else, it strengthened the point for each and every one of us that we must, above all else, above the sympathy, above aid, what the people of Cuba need is revolutionaries in the United States. Revolutionaries in the belly of the beast, striking at the brain of the beast. Because at the end of the day, when we accomplish that task, which is coming, when we accomplish that task, what will it do for the people's movements of the world? It will strengthen them. It will embolden them. And every day we're emboldened by the struggles of the people of South Africa, the people of Haiti, the people who are defending socialist projects in Cuba, Vietnam, China, all across the world. And why do we need revolutionaries here? Because every dollar that is sucked toward the U.S. empire, toward the war machine, that's money that could prevent children from being hungry. That's money that could put people in housing. Tent cities fill cities like Los Angeles. We have tents. We have people sleeping on the streets of D.C., people sleeping on the streets of New York. All of this can be defeated. It can be changed. We have to have the vision, the horizon, that it is possible. And at the end of the day, we need to not be sanctioning Cuba. We need to be building and strengthening the bridges with Cuba. We should be learning from Cuba. Every person in this country should be able to see the project of Cuba up close and personal. It will change each and every person's life. So we're fighting for that future. Do we have a future that's worth living for? Yes! Are we ready to fight for that future? Yes! Are we ready to struggle for that future? Yes! Are we ready to march for that future? Yes! Are we tired? Yes! Are we tired? No! Are we tired of imperialism? Yes! Are we tired of racism? Yes! Are we tired of sexism? Yes! Are we tired of bigotry? Yes! Then together the truth will prevail. The truth will defeat the lies. Reality will overcome this deception. And I speak and I feel the spirit of Malcolm X, of Fidel Castro, two people who met on a day like this, but in September 1960, they met in the Hotel Teresa in Harlem, in New York. And what did they talk about? The shared struggle of our peoples. It's my firm belief that our peoples will be unified. That this continent will be unified. And that this globe will be unified because the only future that guarantees the rights of every single person is a socialist future. A future where democratic rights are guaranteed, where labor rights are guaranteed, where the reproductive rights are guaranteed, where police brutality is a thing of the past, where we've defeated the imperialists and the war machine. And we can win that future. Is that right? Is that right? Venceremos!
All right. We got Yamir from Troika, Colombia.
Oh no, I got it. Oh, let me get the flag. Yeah, thank you. How's everybody? ¿Cómo estás? Cuba sí! Cuba sí! Cuba sí! Cuba sí! Viva Cuba! So, I'm here today. I am here today because I feel like I owe Cuba a lot. As a Colombian American, knowing what Cuba has done for Colombia, helping Colombia out in its peace process. Before I get into that, I just want to say that Cuba is an example to the world. Like I said, the Cuban Revolution shows us what? That Cuba will never be nobody's casino ever again.
that the resources for Cuba is for the Cuban people, and how Cuba has shown us, the whole world, how they've exploded doctors, they've exploded solidarity, and under a vicious blockade. So what does that tell us? That you can blockade a lot of different things, but you cannot blockade solidarity. And that's one thing that we're doing right now. How we're showing solidarity to Cuba. This is how we're breaking the blockade right here in the belly of the beast of Washington, D.C. The belly of the beast, en las extrañas del monstruo, like Jose Marti once said. A great Cuban independence leader. But getting to the topic of Colombia. You know, Colombia has had a armed conflict for over 70 years. Over 70 years of armed conflict that dates back to April 9th, 1948. And that date right there is also very connected with Cuba. Why? Because that was the date when there was a historic presidential candidate named Jorge Gaitan that was running for the Colombian presidency against the oligarchy, and he was known to win, and he was assassinated. And when he was assassinated in Bogota, there was an uprising called the Bogotazo, which a young Fidel Castro was present. Fidel was always internationalist before the triumph of the Cuban Revolution, participating in the liberation of the Dominican Republic against Trujillo, and being in, and also for the liberation of Puerto Rico, que viva Puerto Rico libre. But also being in Colombia to meet with this presidential candidate named Jorge Gaitan that wanted to create a unification of Latin America, wanted to have more integration, economic integration. And with his assassination, that brought forth the creation of the OAS. Can we get a boo to OAS? A boo to Almagro? Or how they call it, Mugre? But, like I said, this is 10 years prior to the triumph of the Cuban Revolution. So this shows how Cuba has brought the will of other peoples, other pueblos. So getting towards the peace process that was started in 2016 with the government of Juan Manuel Santos and the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. This brought forth an ending of a long conflict of people being displaced, of just many different guerrilla forces, many paramilitary forces. And I asked the United States, have they once tried to have peace in Colombia? Have they tried to once have peace? This armed conflict has brought about paramilitary forces that have displaced indigenous and Afro-Colombians, just like our beautiful Afro-President Francia Marquez. She was displaced twice from her territory, and plus the U.S. has had 9 military bases in Colombia. Colombia is utilized as a military base for the United States, so they can have hegemony over the continent. Can we get a boo for that? Can we get a big boo for that? So, you know, for me, it's very important for me to be here for Cuba, just because how Cuba helped with those peace negotiations, and how it was absurd that we had the ex-president Ivan Duque that tried to backstab Cuba, because he tried to do a peace deal with the ELN, and how Cuba didn't break protocols. Cuba did not extradite the ELN back to Colombia, but for that they were punished, and that's why they were put on this list of state sponsor of terrorists, which is very absurd. But now the tides have turned in Colombia, and now we have our first popular president. We have our first popular government. We have the government of Gustavo Petro and of Francia Marquez. And their plan is for peace for Colombia. And the peace for Colombia is very important for the continent of Latin America. Imagine if Colombia had peace, there would be no excuse for the United States to have those military bases. They would have to get out. And we have to thank Cuba for that. And just for this month, how Gustavo Petro was in Cuba the 9th of June to finish off what the other, predecessor, Duque, Porky, like we call him in Colombia, didn't finish off with the ELN. And we have to always thank Cuba. We have to understand that Cuba is not a state sponsor of terrorists, like we say in Colombia. It's a state sponsor of peace. And we have to push that for Cuba. But when it comes to this theme of like who's a terrorist and who's not, you know, I just want to say, you know, like me, I've had family members that were part of revolutionary movements. I had family members that were guerrillas, you know. And I say to Joe Biden, to the government of the United States, as a son and as a nephew, you know, one people's terrorist is another people's freedom fighters. You know, one people's terrorist is another people's freedom fighters. It's absurd that they have a woman like Asada Shakur and they say she's a terrorist. But you know, she's a freedom fighter for all oppressed people, just like Cuba. So I end with saying, muchas gracias a Cuba, mucho agradecimiento del pueblo colombiano a Cuba para ayudar a nosotros a lograr la paz. No solamente para Colombia, pero para América Latina. Thank you, Cuba. Thank you, as a Colombian, for helping help us gain our peace, not just for Colombia, but for all of Latin America. So like they say in Cuba, hasta la victoria siempre venceremos. Hasta la victoria siempre. Hasta la victoria siempre. Hasta la victoria siempre. Viva Cuba socialista.
All right, we got Bree from the Diaspora Pa'lante Collective.
We gotta wait for the Boricua flag. Hold up. Cuba, sí! Cuba, sí! Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brianna, and I'm here on the Diaspora Pa'lante Collective, an organization of Boricuas in the diaspora fighting for the liberation of Borinquen or Puerto Rico. Thank you all for being here today to stand in solidarity with the Cuban people and to demand that the U.S. end the blockade on Cuba and to remove them from the state-sponsored terrorist list. Cuba y Puerto Rico son de un pájaro, las dos alas, reciben flores o balas sobre el mismo corazón. Cuba and Puerto Rico are as two wings of the same bird. They receive flowers and bullets into the same heart. This famous quote comes from Lola Rodriguez de Tio, a revolutionary poet born in Puerto Rico who is known for her radical version of our national anthem, La Borinqueña. Our national anthem is not the U.S. national anthem, FYI. And for creating the Puerto Rican and Cuban flags which you see today, the black and white version being a resistance flag without using the U.S. colors. De Tio fought alongside Jose Marti to oust the Spanish colonizers and resided and died in Cuba after being exiled by the Puerto Rican government by the Spaniards. Cuba has always welcomed Boricua revolutionaries with open arms and continues to do so to this day. Both of our nations were invaded by the U.S. in 1898 and before that by the Spanish in 1492. Our Taino and African ancestors were enslaved to labor on the sugar plantations owned by both imperial powers. After the U.S. took control, it quickly established puppet governments in both Cuba and Puerto Rico, headed by Fulgencio Batista, boo! And Luis Muñoz Marin, boo! To further their capitalist agenda from afar. We see U.S. imperialism and colonization play out in two different ways. The Cuban Revolution succeeded, but the U.S. continues to impede on Cuba's sovereignty through means of economic warfare via the blockade. Puerto Rico, on the other hand, is still a colony of the United States. Still. To this day, as our revolution was squashed, our martyrs imprisoned, tortured, murdered, as bombs were dropped on our towns in Jayuya and Utuado. The U.S. government and mainstream media's propaganda war on Cuba is nothing short of anti-communist rhetoric. The U.S. has historically used reactionary Cubans to carry out this work for them. During the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, reactionary Cubans that were exiled were used as pawns to carry out the U.S.'s operation. Reactionary Cubans were also sent to Puerto Rico to kill those fighting for independence in our country. The U.S. listed Cuba as a terrorist state while ignoring the terror that it has caused towards indigenous people here in the U.S. and nations across the global south. While Cuba holds peace talks in Colombia and builds relations with nations across the world, the U.S. increases aggression and tension, creating new enemies every single day. The Cuban people and the government have openly supported the independence of Puerto Rico, since the beginning of colonization. Boricuas in the diaspora and in our country will carry on the centuries-long tradition of solidarity between our two nations until we are truly liberated from the U.S. empire. ¡Que viva Borica de Cuba libre del imperialismo yanqui! ¡Que viva! ¡Cuba sí! ¡Cuba sí! ¡Cuba sí! Gracias. ¡Y que viva Puerto Rico libre!
Okay, we've been out here for a long time. We've held this street in front of the White House and gotten our message across. We have 3 final speakers. Then we're going to play music and dance. Then we're going to accompany the people who have to leave on the bus to the bus. And then we have an anti-imperialist program at the Thurgood Marshall Center, thank you. And most of us will be walking, but there will be car transportation for people who cannot walk. We have a truck and we have a car and probably some other cars. So keep that in mind. You can see me if you need car transportation. Okay, the next speaker, of course I looked at the list and now I can't remember it. Thank you. The next speaker, I'm really proud to announce because she was part of a really fantastic, groundbreaking official delegation along with Senasex in Cuba for the Days Against Homophobia and Transphobia, something that is celebrated in Cuba. And we're going to hear from her. She's from Women in Struggle, Mujeres en Lucha. Welcome, Liz Toledo, who has traveled from Atlanta.
Cuba sí! Cuba sí! Cuba sí! ¡Que viva Cuba socialista! Hello everyone, thanks for having me come up here. You know, yesterday, well even today, we're celebrating Pride all over the country. LGBTQ plus Pride all over the country. And as I was marching in the Pride march yesterday, you know, I saw banners that talked about love is love. That from me came from a very defensive position, like we have to explain that our love is love. But in Cuba, instead, when we march, Didi and I, when we march in the Conga in Cuba, what was visible everywhere was love is the law. Love is the law in Cuba. Get used to it. We're not trying to excuse, we're not trying to explain. We're trying to say that if you violate the law and oppress any LGBTQ plus person, you will go to prison. That's the law in Cuba. Compare that to the idiotic, I don't even know what to call it, laws in the state of Florida and in some other states that are being passed right now. That idiot DeSantis thinks that by attacking Black history, he thinks that by attacking our LGBTQ siblings, that he is going to be able to gain the vote of the majority of the American and the people from the United States. And he thinks that we will retreat in fear. But guess what? Are we going to retreat in fear? No! Hell no! We're going to keep fighting just like the Cuban people have shown us. We are going to keep, what we have to bear here compares nothing to what they are going through in Cuba. But they continue to fight. They are just like happy, joyous people. You notice
that everyone there is trying to build revolution, from the smallest child to the elder, you know, till the eldest person there. Everyone talks about building revolution and how much they will give up to defend their revolution at all costs. So we have to do the same. The one thing they asked us was what the solidarity and the love of the United States people, what y'all can do for us, is push to end the blockade every day. Push to end the blockade, and that will be the greatest revolutionary act that any of us can do here in the Valley of the Beast. I invite all of you to come join us to march on DeSantis' head on October 7th. On October 7th? On October 7th, we are organizing buses from all over the country to come and march on DeSantis' head. We're going to demand that he ends all this crap against LGBTQ siblings. We're going to demand that he stop trying to avoid the teaching of African American history in our schools. And again, the reason why they do that, the reason why Cuba is on the terrorist list, the reason why they don't want our children to be educated with the real history of the United States is because they know that we will rise up and we will fight back. So we have to show them that even though they're doing all this, we will still be there. We will still show support for our trans youth. We will still show support for all trans people. And we will still be there fighting for everyone as a family that we should be. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thanks, Liz. I'd like to ask Rachel Viguerie to come forward and say a few words.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I know that the White House can hear us. I know that Joe Biden can hear us and that he can't hide from the will of the people. My name is Rachel, and I'm a member of the Atwe Project, a medical aid project in solidarity with the Cuban people, focusing on collecting vital medicines and vitamins and distributing it to people on the island. In the last year, with the support of hundreds of people around the country and around the world, we've been able to distribute vitamins and medicines to maternity homes, burn ointments and antibiotics for victims of the fires in Matanzas last summer, and most recently, 10 tons of construction supplies, including concrete and sheet metal roofing to help rebuild 40 homes destroyed by Hurricane Ian last fall. Today, we're happy to announce a campaign to acquire medication for children with leukemia and lymphomas in Cuba, working with Cuban and American oncologists and building bridges between them. Cuba has faced overlapping crises and the pressures of this unjust blockade with dignity. Cuba has always extended an unmatched solidarity to the oppressed around the world, especially with their healthcare efforts, freely sharing their technological and biomedical advances. And despite its own difficulties, they provide a model for the world to follow of solidarity and of international cooperation. The relentless attacks against Cuba have grown even more fierce. The sanctions strangling Cuba attack every aspect of life on the island. When Cuba was re-added to the state sponsors of terrorism list in 2021, 60% of imported materials, especially pharmaceuticals, were cut off overnight. Biden keeps Cuba on the SSOT. And now the Force Act, proposed this year, demands nothing less than Cuba becoming a colony of the United States once again. Lies about Cuba are being spread, Havana syndrome, and now these xenophobic myths of Chinese bases on the island. Why is all this happening now? Because the world stands with Cuba. These sanctions have been condemned all over the world, even in Western nations. The United States can no longer justify these cruel and inhumane measures. This immense pressure comes because our struggle is succeeding. We should be encouraged and take heart and fight harder still. We must continue to build international solidarity movements. We have to continue to build power among the people in the United States. With solidarity and people's power, we can end the blockade against Cuba and end U.S. imperialism once and for all. The Atwe Project project is named after the Taino chief Atue, Cuba's first national hero and a symbol of resistance against colonialism, who left his home island to warn the indigenous people of Cuba and fight with them against their oppressors. In the spirit of this undying resistance, we are here today in solidarity with the Cuban people to continue the struggle and keep fighting until the blockade is ended. Cuba, sí! Cuba, sí! Cuba, sí! Thank you.
We're going to wrap up the speaking portion with a very special person who was instrumental in doing something that was very important. I'm going to introduce her. Super quick. Super quick. I want to take a moment to introduce the next speaker. I'm going to ask Dr. Rosemary Mealy to please come forward. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Mealy has been a tremendous asset to the Cuba Solidarity Movement since she was about this high. I credit my Cuba Solidarity involvement with this woman. She's my mentor, she's my friend, she is a member of the board of directors of IFCO Pastors for Peace, Dr. Rosemary Mealy. Let's take a moment of silence because we're standing on the ground of the Piscataway peoples, the indigenous peoples.
We're standing on the ground of the indigenous people, the Piscataway. Let's give them a moment of silence. Now here we are, brothers and sisters, competing with what's outside. It's only going to take a minute. We've gotten history lessons from everybody. I don't need to say anything else, but I'm specifically here. I'm specifically here.
Well, I've been here all day. What the hell is going on? Can you hear me? Louder! I'm here too.
I'm here to take only a few minutes. You've heard the history, you've heard the stories, okay? In New York City on Thursday, the second largest city in the United States of America passed a resolution by the City Council of New York calling on the Biden administration and the Congress of this country to end the blockade of Cuba and also to remove Cuba from the list of so-called terrorist states. Now, I just want to say, this struggle is not for tourists. This struggle is a hard struggle. This struggle is not to return home and feeling good about being in Washington, D.C. This struggle is about going into the streets, going into your city councils, going wherever you have to go, and standing up for Cuba. This struggle, we have to win this struggle. 60 years, there's a whole generation of young Cubans who have never known anything except the blockade. We have to change that. We have to change the narrative in this country about whose streets? Our streets. Whose streets? Our streets. Who has the power? We have the power. We have the power. So brothers and sisters, I know you all are tired and I appreciate your standing here. I said I was going to be brief. I'm just saying, return home and hit the streets. Return home and hit the streets. Thank you.
All right, wait, you go say something? Okay, so I guess this is the end right now. So in Cuba, you know, Cuba is socialist, but it's also Caribbean and they like to party and be happy. That's the part of socialism that I think about, is bringing back your happiness, taking your time back from capitalism. So who's ready to dance? Who's ready to bring some rhythm from Cuba, here in DC, in the belly of the beast? Bueno, vámonos, maestro.
Everybody, let's dance together! This is a party! Súbalo, DJ!
You gotta move your feet. There is a song, it's called Me Dicen Cuba. Me Dicen Cuba. You know, have you heard Habana de Primera? Who knows Habana de Primera here? So there is a song called Me Dicen Cuba. We play always. It's like an anthem for us because it talks about Cuba. It's called Me Dicen Cuba. They call me Cuba. It's a salsa, and I want you all to dance salsa with me. Okay? Let's dance salsa all together. Everybody, let's dance salsa. Come on. Oye, sí, Cuba, sí. Cuba, sí. Abajo el bloqueo. Oye, qué rico. Cuba music. Ahí nada más. Repite y pon. Vengo donde el sol calienta la tierra, allí donde el corazón luce más sincero. Vengo de donde el sol pasa las horas, enamorando a la rumba, cantando que pegue el bolero. Díselo. Traigo mi religión y mi esperanza, mezclado con mi tambor y mi melodía. Tan solo quiero que sepas lo que se siente cuando se llena tu alma con toda mi cubanía. Cubano soy, siempre pura cepa, y las raíces las defiendo con la vida. Cubano soy, y donde quiera que me encuentre cantaré a mi Cuba querida. Vengo de donde el sol calienta mi tierra, y la tierra donde nací y donde viviré. Por eso te traigo ahora mi canción, para que sepas el porqué. Okay, guys. Me dicen Cuba. Para saber de verdad lo que es sentirse cubano, tiene que leerte a Martín, la prosa de Guillén, con una guayabera y un sombrero de guano. Para saber de verdad lo que es sentirse cubano, para que te llegue la foto. Tienes que haber vivido un cubano de verdad, para vivir por su tierra, viva de frente, preparado y a su bandera se aferra. Okay, listen to me, listen to me. Let's do something. Everybody, may I have your attention, please? Who wants to learn how to dance Cuban salsa? Raise your hand. Okay, I want you all standing in front of me here. Come on, everybody who wants to learn, I'm going to teach you how to dance salsa today in front of the White House to ask Biden to lift off the sanctions to Cuba. Let's dance salsa. Everybody who wants to learn how to dance salsa, face me here because we are having salsa lessons in front of the White House. Salsa lessons here right now, everybody. Stop the music, DJ. Okay, listen to me. Salsa is quite easy. You're just gonna follow me. Listen to me. We're gonna go with the right leg, one step forward, then we go back to the middle and a step backward. That's basic step. So we're gonna use mathematics. We're gonna count 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. You got it? It's quite easy. Right leg forward, left leg backward. And we count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's do it without music. Let's try everybody. Follow me. 1, 2, 3, and 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 1, 2, 3. Give it up, give it up, give it up! Let's try with music, DJ. Give me some music. Play it on. Let's do it with music. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Ready, everyone? Play it, DJ. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, y 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Forward, middle, backward, middle. Forward, middle, backward, middle. Go, go, give it go. Go, go. Go, go, go. Go, go. Clap your hands. Go, go. Come on. Go, go. And go, go. Go, go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. DJ, párame la música ahí. Stop the music. Okay, now we're gonna go to another step. We're gonna complicate it. But it looks complicated, but it's not. We're gonna count mathematics. Like we go crossing legs backward. Crossing legs backward. We go 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and clap, clap, 3, and clap, clap. Come on, give it up, come on. Clap, clap, 3, and clap, clap, 3, and let's do it with music. Give it up for you, DJ. Play it on. Ready? We're gonna cross leg backwards on the count of 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Come on. Clap, clap. Okay, guys, we gotta go. Give it up for the people who've done this salsa. Abajo el local. Cuba sí. Cuba sí. Cuba sí. Cuba sí. Abajo local. Let Cuba live. Let Cuba live. Okay, now we're leaving, guys. We're leaving. Give it up for yourself. We're leaving.
Some of us are leaving on the People's Forum bus. If you came from New York on the People's Forum bus, let me see your hands. All right, make sure that you find each other and get on the bus, because you gotta leave. Ryan is over to that way with the yellow vest in his hand. If you didn't come on that bus, okay, so if you came on the People's Forum bus, follow Ryan. He's got the yellow vest in the air. Find somebody that you saw on the bus with you and follow them. Ryan's gonna lead us across behind the statue to where the bus is. So follow Ryan. If you came from New York, please do not miss that bus. Here. That's Daddy. If you were not on that bus and you're planning to join us for the panel, we are going to head over to the Thurgood Marshall Center right now. So you can go ahead and start that way, and we'll get things started around 3:30. We are headed to the Thurgood Marshall Center now. Unless you came on the bus from New York City with the People's Forum, they are headed right now in a line to my left. You can see Ryan standing that way with a yellow vest in his hand. Follow the purple shirts. Follow the people that were sitting on the bus next to you. Thank you so much for joining us. For everyone else, please stay for the panel afterwards to hear from the organizations that put this together, that joined us out here today, and hear what they have to say. Yeah, we should be at that panel by 3:30. It's 3. The panel will begin at 3:30. Please make your way to the Thurgood Marshall Center. I don't know what that is. Let me, you want a picture? Oh yeah, no, we've been on it.
Hey, there's lots more salsa lessons all throughout DC. There's other places. Keep on, find out where they're at, sign up. It's good we sing and dance. We show that we're a people of joy, of love, of peace. We have things to be angry about, but we're not an angry people. Let's express our love through singing and dancing. That's how we win our battles. That's how you be victorious in the end. All right? So, hey, I'm Captain DJ Matthew. If you want to spend me something, donate me something, I appreciate it. I showed up, got them all singing and dancing. So appreciate it, all right?
44-minute lunch or 20 minutes. And if we find a place to drop it off, great. And if we don't, we're going to the Justice Center.